Welcome to Tales of Fantasy. Tonight we journey to the far edges of the northern seas, to a place where the wind carries the scent of salt and the waves have whispered their stories for centuries. Along the rugged coasts of Scotland, Ireland, and the scattered islands of the North Atlantic, the sea has always been more than a body of water. It has long been a source of life, a place of danger, and a keeper of quiet, enduring legends. For generations, fishermen returning from long days on the water shared their stories beside their fires, while travelers spoke in hushed voices of strange sightings along the lonely beaches. Villagers would sometimes whisper about seals that seemed almost too watchful, too aware, as though they were observing the human world with an understanding that could not easily be explained. From those quiet observations, carried across years and retold through countless voices, emerged one of the most haunting and enduring legends of the sea, the legend of Selkies. At first glance, Selkies appeared to be no different from ordinary seals, moving through the cold northern waters in sleek gray bodies as they glided beneath the surface with effortless grace. They would sometimes surface near rocky shores, resting on outcroppings or drifting silently through the surf, their dark eyes fixed on the distant land. Yet according to the old stories, these seals held a secret that revealed itself only under particular conditions. On certain nights, when the moon rose full and bright above the ocean, casting silver light across the waters, Selkies were said to leave the sea behind and come ashore. They would climb onto quiet beaches or smooth coastal rocks where the tide gently touched the land, and there, in the stillness of the night, something remarkable would occur. The seals would shed their skins. In the pale glow of the moonlight, the smooth gray seal skins would slip away, and where a seal had rested only moments before, a human figure would now stand upon the sand. According to centuries of folklore, Selkies were shapeshifters, creatures of the sea who could take on human form simply by removing their seal skins. However, this skin was far more than a simple covering. It was their true connection to the ocean, an essential part of their identity and existence. Without it, they could not return to the water, and without it, they were bound to the land, unable to reclaim their place beneath the waves. Because of this, Selkies were said to guard their skins carefully whenever they came ashore, hiding them among rocks or beneath seaweed before allowing themselves to walk freely along the beaches in human form. In many of the old coastal legends, these moments on land were filled with a quiet joy. The Selkies would gather beneath the moonlight, their laughter carried softly across the water as the tide moved in, slow, steady rhythms behind them. They would dance along the shoreline, their bare feet pressing into the cool sand, their moments light and unrestrained, as though they were savoring the brief time they could exist between two worlds. The world of the sea, vast and endless, and the world of humans, solid and fleeting. Most nights these gatherings passed unseen, known only to the waves and the wind. Yet there were times when someone would stumble upon them, drawn by the sound of distant laughter or the faint echo of movement along the shore. Those who claimed to witness the Selkies in human form often described them as strikingly similar ways. They spoke of a quiet, otherworldly beauty, of dark hair that shone like wet stone beneath the moonlight, and of eyes that held the shifting colors of the sea, sometimes calm and gray, and sometimes deep and storm-like. Even while standing on the land, there was something about them that seemed distant, as though a part of their spirit remained tied to the water, just beyond the shore. It is at this point in many legends that Selkie stories began to take a more complicated and often sorrowful turn. In a great number of these tales, a human observer notices something hidden among the rocks or tangled within the seaweed, a seal skin, left behind while its owner walks on the shore. What follows is one of the most recognizable and defining elements of Selkie folklore. The human takes the skin and hides it, often driven by a mixture of fascination, desire, and the belief that this act will allow them to keep the Selkie in human form. Without her skin, the Selkie cannot return to the sea. When she discovers that it's missing, the stories say she searches the beach in growing desperation, knowing that the path back to her true home has been taken from her. Eventually, the one who hid her skin reveals himself, and in many traditional versions of the story, the Selkie woman is persuaded or compelled by circumstance to remain on land. She becomes a wife, living in a cottage near the sea, where the sound of waves is never far away. Years pass in this way, and in many retellings she rebuilds a life that appears peaceful from the outside. Children are born, seasons change, and the rhythms of the village life continuously go on steadily. Fishing boats leave the harbor at dawn and return at dusk. Storms roll in from the horizon, and life carries on as it always has. Yet, beneath this calm and extraordinary existence, the old legends suggest that a quiet sadness always remains. No matter how many years pass, the Selkie never truly forgets the ocean. The ocean is always within sight, always within reach, yet forever beyond her grasp. She hears the waves each night as they rise and fall against the shore, and sometimes she walks alone to the cliffs, standing silently as the wind moves across the water. There are moments when the seals gather near the shore, their forms visible in the distance, and in these moments the Selkie is said to watch them with an expression that others cannot fully understand. Perhaps they are her kin, her family, or the companion she once swam beside in the deep open waters. Whatever the case, the connection remains quiet but unbroken. As the story continues, there inevitably comes a moment of change. The hidden sealskin is discovered. In some versions of the tale, a curious child finds it while searching through an old chest, unaware of its significance. In others, a powerful storm uncovers the place where it had been hidden for years, revealing it at last. And sometimes the Selkie herself comes upon it unexpectedly, long after she has stopped searching, believing it to be lost forever. The moment she touches the skin again, the legend said that everything returns to her at once. The memory of the ocean, the sensation of moving through water, and the deep, undeniable pull of the sea. No matter how much she may care for the life she has built on land, the call of the ocean is something she cannot resist. It's not simply a longing, but a part of who she is, something that cannot be set aside and forgotten. And so she walks once more towards the shore. The tide is often described as rising in these moments, and the water creeping steadily across the sand, as though reaching out to meet her. The wind carries the familiar scent of salt and distance, and the horizon stretches wide and endless before her. Standing at the edge of the sea, the Selkie holds the skin that was once taken from her, the piece of herself that had been missing for so long. Then, with a quiet certainty, she places it over her shoulders, just as she did on those long ago nights beneath the moonlight. She transforms once again. Where a woman once stood upon the shore, a seal now rests at the edge of the tide. For a brief moment she lingers, and in many of the old stories she looks back only once, towards the life she is leaving behind. Then, without hesitation, she slips into the water, and the ocean closes around her as she disappears beneath the waves. Yet, even this is not always the end of the story. In many coastal traditions, there are quiet accounts of seals that linger near the shore, watching the land with unusual stillness. Fishermen have spoken of these moments, of a single seal remaining longer than the others, its gaze fixed on the beach as though searching for something it remembers. Some believe that these are Selkies who have returned, not to reclaim their lives on land, but to watch over the children they left behind, a presence at the edge of the world where the sea and shore meet. Whether understood as folklore, metaphor, or memory shaped by generations of life right next to the sea, the legend of Selkies has endured because it speaks to something deeply human. It is a story of love that crosses boundaries, of loss that cannot be avoided, and the quiet understanding that some beings cannot remain where they do not belong. The sea, vast and ever-moving, represents both freedom and distance, a place that cannot be held or controlled. Even now, along the northern coast where their stories are first told, the ocean continues its steady rhythm, waves rising and falling as they always have. Seals can still be seen resting on distant rocks or drifting through the surf, their dark eyes reflecting the shifting light of the sky. Most who see them think little of it, yet the old stories remain, carried forward in quiet ways. And perhaps on certain nights, when the moon is bright and the sea is calm, these stories feel a little closer to the surface, because somewhere beneath those cold shifting waters, the Selkies are still said to swim, moving silently through the deep, watching the shores they once walked, and waiting for the moment when the tide and the moon call them back once more. The following story comes from old Scottish and Celtic folklore that's been passed down for generations and is now a part of the public domain. What you're about to hear is a retelling. The Seal Woman Who Returned to the Sea. Along the same northern shores where the Selkie stories were first whispered, there exists another telling, one that feels quieter, more personal, and perhaps even more sorrowful. It is not so different from the others at first glance, yet in its details, it lingers in a way that's harder to forget. This is the story often known as the Seal Woman, a tale of love that was never meant to last, and of a return that always seemed waiting beneath the surface. The story begins, as many of them do, with the sea. It is said that along a remote stretch of coastline, where the land rises in dark cliffs and the wind carries the constant sound of waves, there lived a man who spent most of his days alone. His life followed the steady rhythm of the shore, shaped by the tide and the changing seasons. He rose early in the mornings, long before the sun had fully broken over the horizon, and walked the narrow paths that led down to the water. There he would cast his nets, watching as the ocean shifted endlessly before him. He was not unhappy, but his life was quiet. The sea was his only companion, and perhaps because of that he watched it more closely than most. There were nights when the water seemed different to him, when the surface carried a stillness that felt almost deliberate. On one of those nights, the moonlight stretched across the waves in long silver paths, and the shoreline seemed to hold its breath. It was during one of those nights that he first saw her. At a distance, near a stretch of smooth rocks, where the tide met the land, he noticed movement. At first, he thought it was a group of seals resting along the shore, their bodies rising and falling with the rhythm of the water. But as he stood there watching, something changed. One of the seals shifted in a way that did not seem natural, and then slowly It moved forward onto the sand. What followed was not something he could easily explain. In the pale glow of the moon, the seal seemed to change. Its form softened, its shape shifting until where there had once been only a seal moments before, there now stood a woman. She moved carefully at first, as though adjusting to the land beneath her feet, then more freely, walking along the shoreline with a quiet, effortless grace. He did not move. He did not call out. He simply watched, unsure if what he was seeing was real. The woman was not alone. Others had come ashore as well, their sealskins left behind among the rocks. Their laughter echoed softly across the water. They moved together in the moonlight, their presence light and fleeting, as though they belonged more to the sea than to the land beneath them. And yet, it was her that held his attention. There was something in the way she moved, something in the stillness she carried, even as she walked, that made her seem different from the others. She paused often, looking out toward the ocean as though listening for something only she could hear. When the night began to fade, the women returned to the rocks. One by one, they gathered their sealskins, lifting them carefully and drawing them back around themselves. As they did, their form shifted once more, and soon the shore was empty again, save for the quiet movement of the tide. But it was not entirely empty, because one skin remained. It lay partially hidden among the rocks, untouched as though forgotten. The man noticed it immediately, and in that moment something within him shifted. He moved forward slowly, his steps careful against the sand, until he stood before the sealskin. It was cool to the touch, heavier than he expected, and as he lifted it, he felt a strange certainty settle over him. He knew what it meant. He knew without it the woman would not be able to return to the sea, and yet he did not leave it there. Instead, he carried it with him as he walked back from the shore, the sound of the waves following close behind. When the woman returned to the rocks and found her skin missing, the stillness of the night broke. She searched the shoreline, her movements quick and unsteady, her calm replaced by something closer to fear. The others had already gone, slipping back into the water and disappearing beneath the surface, leaving her alone. It was then that he stepped forward. At first, she did not see him. Her attention was fixed on the sea, as though she might will herself back into it. But when she turned and found him standing there, the understanding came quickly. He held the skin, and she knew what that meant. The stories say that what followed was not loud or chaotic, but quiet. There were words exchanged, though they are rarely recorded in detail. Some versions say she begged for the return of her skin. Others say she stood in silence, already understanding that the choice had been taken from her. In the end, she went with him. The years that followed passed much in the same way as they do in other retellings. She lived in his home near the sea, becoming a part of a life that was not her own. From the outside, everything appeared as it should. The days were filled with work, the season turned, and in time, children were born. She cared for them. She spoke gently. She moved through her days with quiet patience, but there was always something beneath the surface. She often walked to the shore alone, standing at the edge of the water as the tide moved in and out. She would remain there for long stretches of time, her gaze fixed on the horizon, as though searching for something she could not quite reach. Sometimes seals would gather in the distance, and in those moments she would grow still. It was said that they watched her just as she watched them, a silent recognition passing between them across the water. Years passed in this way. until one day, without warning, everything changed. The skin was found. In some retellings, it was discovered by one of her children, hidden away where it had been kept for so long. In others, it was uncovered by chance, revealed after years of being forgotten. However it happened, the moment remained the same. She saw it, and when she did, everything returned to her at once. The memory of the ocean, the feeling of moving through the water, the sense of belonging to something vast and endless. She held the skin in her hands, and for a moment she did not move. The life she had built stood before her. The sea waited before her. There was no rush in her decision, no hesitation, only a quiet certainty. She walked to the shore as the tide began to rise, and the water reaching slowly across the sand as though meeting her halfway. The wind carried the scent of salt, familiar and unchanged, and the sound of the waves filled the space around her. When she reached the edge of the water, she placed the skin over her shoulders. Once again, she became what she had always been. For a brief moment, she remained there, her form half lit by the fading light, caught between two worlds. Then, without turning back, she slipped into the sea, and she was gone. But like many of the other stories, this was not entirely the end. There are quiet accounts passed down along the same coast where these legends began, of a seal that returns to the shore from time to time. It lingers longer than the others, its dark eyes fixed upon the land, watching with a stillness that feels almost human. Some say it comes to see the children it left behind, not to return, not to stay, but simply to remember. And then, as the tide shifts away and the light begins to fade, it disappears once more beneath the waves, returning to the place where it had always belonged.